On Krillus 9, the night cycle didn't bring darkness so much as a different flavor of glare. The day lamps dimmed, yes, but the station's rust-colored conduits glowed from waste heat, and the vent fog picked up the low light like a stubborn dawn. Jax Renner preferred it that way. The night shift belonged to the people who liked being missed, haulers without cargo, cooks sneaking out extra ration bricks, a mechanic from old Earth who could thread a power conduit through a bulkhead by feel alone, and keep his head down about it. He sat on a overturned crate beside Bay for 7F, boots splayed, back to a wall scarred by plasma pits. On his lap, a cracked interface pad scavenged from his Atari courier. Its diagnostics flickered between languages it no longer knew how to read. Jax coaxed a pry pick under the housing, thinking of how much he could get for the ribbon connector. Enough for the good solder, the kind that melted like a soft sigh instead of spitting at you. For your impertinence. Careful, he muttered to himself as a microspring leapt for freedom. He caught it with a calloused thumb and grinned. No stage dives. Above him, a gantry crane coughed to life, winding its way along a rail. Somewhere deeper in the docks, a pressure door sealed with a thump you felt more than heard. Krillus 9 was always reminding you that it could live without you, Renner, called a voice from the corridor. Jax didn't look up. He knew the voice. Pal Haldra, Dockmaster 3rd Tier, a man who wore his badge like a prayer. Not your bay, free drift, Jax said. No one's booked it. Pal appeared anyway, thin as a stretched cable, eyes pinched. Reg sheets say Imperial inspection within the next sole. He rolled the word Imperial like it might break his teeth. You don't want to be underfoot if, relax, Jax said. He lifted the interface pad and the spring. Untidying, Pal glanced at the pad, at the coil of salvaged cable, at Jax's patched jacket with its flaking Renner Repairs stamp. He had the look of a man positioned precariously between outrage and sympathy. But the balance point tonight favored outrage. If Drake's set foot in here, you vanish. Off the record, off the floor, off my liability path, noted, Jax said. Because arguing with a man worrying about dragons was like arguing with a pressure leak. It turned minor until it wasn't. Pal sniffed. And if you see anything scaled, you report to me immediately. Don't be a hero. He walked off, stiff-shouldered, muttering into his wristcom. Jax let out the breath he'd been holding. Imperial inspection. He'd heard the rumors smugglers scrubbed their manifests, station clerks polished their grammar. Even the black market protein vats ran 1 degree cooler, as if temperature could hide sin. Jax's work didn't intersect with official things. His customers smiled with their eyes, paid in cash, and never asked for receipts. Still, an inspection meant tension, and tension made people careless. Carelessness meant more broken things. Jax's business model, such as it was, surfed the crest of other people's mistakes. He reassembled the interface pad, slotted the spring, checked the ribbon. The pad flashed a cooperative green. Jax powered it down and slid it into his canvas bag, alongside spools of wire, a set of smart tweezers with a cracked handle, and a small music box from Earth, brass, dented, with a winder that used to be a key. He rotated the winder once, twice, and stopped before it could sing. He didn't like to hear it on nights like this. The melody brought back a kitchen with linoleum floors and the way his sister, Kemi, had danced in socks. Stations didn't have floors for dancing. They had grates that grabbed your soles. He rose, knees complaining, and took to the maintenance corridor that curved around the neglected bays, the ones with out-of-date atmospheric seals and paperwork older than Jax's tools. He knew where the cameras blinked and where they didn't. He knew which pressure doors stuck unless you kicked them just so. He knew that if you were quiet near for 9B you could hear the compost augers, grinding station waste into something edible if you were desperate enough. He also knew because he'd counted that 9 times out of 10 the quiet broke with a hiss, a rattle, a curse, a laugh. Stations weren't churches. Tonight, the quiet broke with a sound Jax had never heard on a station. He stopped as if a cable had tightened around his chest. A child's cry. Not a wail of pain. Not the sharp yelp of hurt. This was a stuck-in-your-throat sob, hiccuping and earnest. The sound of a small grief with no place to go. Jax's feet made the decision before his brain did. He padded toward it, past a tangle of retired conduits and a stack of crates stamped with shipping codes. Nobody used anymore. The cry came from behind a bulkhead access panel where a section of wall had been removed, and then lazily propped back in place with a rod. Light leaked through the gap, a puddle of warmth in the station's cold color. "Hey," Jack said softly, not wanting to spook a kid. He set his bag down in the corridor and raised his hands to show they were empty. "You okay in there?" The cry stuttered into silence. He heard the quick breath of someone deciding between fight and flight. "I'm Jax," he added, because names were tools. "Mechanic. I can fix things." Or rustle. The panel shifted the slightest degree. A pair of eyes looked out. They were too bright. Jax's first thought was that the child's parents liked expensive optics. His second thought, immediate and heavy, was that he was wrong. Those weren't optics. They were eyes. Reptilian, slit-pupiled. The irises a molten gold that caught the corridor light and made something deep in Jax's hindbrain. "Want to run?" He held very still. The panel slid wider with a scrape that would give Pell a panic attack. A small head peeked out, horn nubs barely poking through a crest of fine scales. The rest of the body remained tucked behind the panel, but Jax didn't need more to understand. Hatchling, dragon, imperial bloodline. Every warning Pell had ever muttered now sounded woefully inadequate. The hatchling's gaze flicked over Jax's empty hands, over his boots, over the bag in the corridor. It sniffed. A thin coil of smoke unwound from its nostrils and dissipated. When it spoke, the voice was high and hoarse with recent crying. "You fix?" It asked, the consonants soft, as if it hadn't had to say them often. "You said fix. I fix machines," Jax said, voice steady, "and sometimes kitchen chairs, and once a cat's leg brace, but that was mostly the cat doing the work." He realized he was babbling and shut his mouth. The hatchling tilted its head. The panel edged wider, and Jax saw a small clawed hand clutching an object. It was a toy bird, mechanical, no bigger than Jax's palm. Its wings were a patchwork of slotted plates, notched to mesh with tiny gear teeth. Someone had painted the plates with iridescent lacquer that caught the light and threw back colors, like a puddle under stars. The head was a little beak and two jewel eyes, one of which sat askew. A winding key protruded from its side. "Birdie won't sing," the hatchling said. There was no accusation in it, only despair in the way only a child could flatten a word into a plea. "Birdie made song. Birdie made sleep. Birdie," its voice collapsed for a second, and it hugged the toy tight against its chest. "Birdie won't." Jax felt something he wasn't prepared to feel on a night cycle in a drafty corridor, a memory. Stepping forward without asking, Kemi with a wind-up ballerina, the spring inside worn to a sentimentally dusted ribbon. Their father at a kitchen table, saying he had one more trick, just one. And could Jax hand him the small screwdriver with the red tape on the handle? "Can I take a look?" Jax asked gently. "I won't break it more." The hatchling's eyes narrowed. Trust was a currency Jax had never had much luck with. He lifted his hands again, palms out, and took a half step back, giving the little person room to make a decision. A beat, two, in the stillness. Jax became keenly aware of every station noise, the distant churn of the life support fans, the clink-clink of a loose bolt settling somewhere in the wall, the faint hum that meant Bay 50 still hadn't fixed its field emitters. He also became aware of something else, something like the feeling of being watched when no one was there. It pressed along his shoulders and then was gone, too subtle to name and too real to ignore. The hatchling extended the toy. Jax moved slowly, as if approaching a skittish animal, though animals didn't usually carry hereditary claims to vengeance. He took the toy into his hands. It was warm where the hatchling had held it, and the lacquer smelled faintly of smoke and some sweet resin Jax couldn't place. Up close he could see what had gone wrong. A gear tooth had sheared, probably from overwinding, and one of the feather plates had been jammed into the wing's pivot. The jewel eye had a hairline crack running through it like a leash. He turned the toy over, looking for a maker's mark. Nothing obvious. The foot felt heavy raw, a counterweight. Not designed by a hack, then. Someone who knew the balance point between whimsy and physics. "Birdie is quiet," the hatchling said, as if Jax had missed the point of all this. "I see," Jax said. "I can try to make it unquiet." "Unquiet," the hatchling repeated, tasting the word and apparently finding it acceptable. A hiccup escaped it. It swiped at its eyes with the back of a wrist and left a faint streak on its scales. "Please, do your parents know you're here?" The question slipped out of Jax as much out of habit as caution. Children on a station meant adults on a station. Adults meant rules. Rules meant someone for Pell to yell at that wasn't Jax. The hatchling's pupils tightened. I had glanced down, sudden guilt making it smaller. Nurse slept. Nurse is tired. A quick, reluctant defense. I am quiet when nurse sleeps. Jax did not have the training to adjudicate dragon childcare. He also did not have the desire to. He had the toy, and the toy was a problem he could solve. He motioned toward the crate he'd been using earlier. "I'll need my tools. They're just there. You can stay in the wall if that feels better." The hatchling retreated half a pace, but left the panel open, peering around it like a moon around a planet. Jax went to his bag, every sense thinking about how his back was exposed and how fast a child dragon could move. If it chose, he kept the movement smooth, unthreatening, like he'd practiced when approaching skittish clients, and returned with a roll of microfiber, a coil of cuspers, the smart tweezers, and the good lamp he only used on jobs that mattered. He spread the cloth on the crate and set the bird in the center, hands steady even as his heart drummed double time. He clicked on the lamp. Its beam was clean and honest. "You'll watch?" Jax asked, half to keep the hatchling engaged and half because talking to someone made the station feel less hungry. The hatchling nodded gravely. "I will watch, okay, birdie," Jax murmured, angling the lamp. "Let's see what you swallowed." He teased the pivot pin free with the tweezers, eased the jammed plate out, and held the feather up to the light. The iridescence wasn't paint after all. It was micro-etched, thousands of ridges turning light to color. Whoever had made this had cared about how wonder worked. The thought made Jax careful in a way he rarely had to be with cargo clamps. He looked up once and caught the hatchling watching his hands, like a student watches a teacher performing a spell. Its breathing had evened out. The hard little hiccups were gone. "Where'd you get Birdie?" he asked, not sure if conversation was allowed, but needing to cut through the intimacy of the lamp and the "Work, Papa," a soft answer that carried weight. He said, "Birdie is for brave nights, when the sky is loud." Jax's mouth went dry at the word Papa. He kept his face still, but his blood remembered every warning he'd ever heard. The dragon's empire wasn't a metaphor like humans like to make their empires. It was literal. It had boundaries you could crash a ship against and laws that glowed when you broke them. "Brave nights," Jax repeated, as if it were just a quaint phrase and not a map to a throne room. He angled the bird, saw the sheared tooth again, and calculated the tolerances. He could swap in a spare from the Zatari pad's drive assembly, file it to fit, polish the burrs. It would sing again. He could do that. He wanted to do that. He also wanted to put the toy down, step back, and pretend he had never seen scales in a dock at night. Something shifted above him. Not a noise, a sense. Like a heat shimmer you feel along your neck rather than see. Jax glanced up, instinct wrestling with common sense. The maintenance crawlspace ran just over this corridor, accessible by a hatch no one bothered to lock, because you'd have to be a rat to fit. The grate sat in shadow, a mouth with bars. Nothing moved behind it. The lamp made a small pool of light, and Jax and the hatchling and Birdie sat in its center. As if marked, "Birdie," the hatchling whispered, all the earlier grief thinner now. Hope creeping up like a cautious sunrise. "Working on it," Jax said, surprised at the steadiness of his voice. He set the damaged gear aside, reached for his bag, and selected a gear of similar size but different profile. He held it next to the bird's heartworks, saw the mismatch, and smiled despite himself. "Stubborn little thing." The hatchling's nostrils flared with interest. "Stubborn means it wants to sing its own way, oh," the hatchling said, and nodded like this was a trait to respect. Jax laid his tools out in a neat little constellation. He breathed in, breathed out, and found the small, human place where hands and focus made sense of the world. The station, the inspection, the word Papa. The prickling awareness of being observed from above, all of it packed itself into a corner behind his eyes and waited. "Okay," he said, more to himself than to the hatchling. "Let's fix a song." He didn't notice the narrow shadow that slid along the crawlspace grate and stilled. A predator's patience wrapped in gravity and gold. He didn't see the shape of a larger world bending toward a mechanic's lamp and a child's hope. He only saw gears and metal feathers, and a problem that was small enough to be solved by gentle hands. The hatchling watched, quiet at last, eyes gleaming. The toy lay between them, broken and beautiful, and above, unseen, something vast watched back. The lamp's light carved a circle of clarity in the dim bay, and within it Jack Renner bent like a priest at an altar. His tools gleamed on the cloth, microfiles, tweezers, soldering wand with its chipped ceramic casing, all laid out in reverence to a task that had grown larger than it had any right to be. The hatchling crouched opposite him, claws curled nervously on the metal floor, tail twitching against the bulkhead. Its eyes followed every motion of Jax's hands. Birdie was loud when I wound him. The hatchling whispered, voice a mix of guilt and sorrow. I turned the key, and he cried, and then he was quiet forever. Jax angled his lamp closer, squinting at the snapped gear tooth he had pried loose. Not forever, he said gently. Machines don't really die, kid. They just run out of rhythm. Rhythm can be coaxed back. The hatchling blinked at the word rhythm as though it were a spell. The work of small thinks. Jax selected a brass gear from his pouch of scavenged parts. It was a relic from a century-old clock he'd bought off a desperate freighter captain, for a half credit and a promise never to mention it in front of the man's crew. The teeth were close in size but not perfect. He braced it under the lamp and began to file. Every stroke of the file made a whisper like a secret being shared. He tuned the teeth down, matching the spacing to the damaged gear. Sweat prickled his forehead, but his hands stayed steady. The hatchling leaned closer. You cut it smaller. Yeah, Birdie's heart has a certain beat. If the gear doesn't match, the beat stumbles. Machines have hearts. Jax gave a half smile. Not like yours, but they've got places where everything depends on everything else. You treat those places wrong, the whole thing falls apart. The hatchling tilted its head, as if testing this idea against its limited store of wisdom. Jax thought of Kemi again, dancing to the music box, thought of their father, who had said something similar once while fixing an old ship's manifold. Everything depends on everything else, boy. Respect that, and even rust will hold for you. He hadn't thought of those words in years, but tonight they were alive in his fingers, sparks in the silence. With the gear filed down, Jax slotted it into Birdie's tiny housing. He soldered the connection, sparks flaring against the lamp's glow. The hatchling flinched at the hiss of heat. Don't worry, Jax murmured. Sparks mean the metal's listening. The metal listens. Sometimes. He grinned faintly. Or maybe I just talk too much. The hatchling's tail flicked again, this time in amusement. Its lips pulled back in what might have been the beginning of a smile. Or maybe just the draconic version of one. Birdie's wing assembly resisted when Jax tried to seat the plates. The jammed pivot had warped the track. He breathed out, slid his tweezers into the narrow space, and coaxed it true again. Millimeter by millimeter. He was aware of how quiet the hatchling had become, its earlier tears replaced by sharp, expectant silence. The toy's wing clicked into place. The sound was soft, but to the hatchling it was thunder. Birdie? The hatchling whispered, leaning forward. Not yet, Jax said. Patience. He's still remembering how to sing. The song restored wound the key, one careful turn. The gears inside meshed, tentative, as if uncertain about their new companion. Then, slowly, the bird's wings flexed. A faint hum rose from its chest cavity, gathering itself like a breath. And then, trill. The sound was high and sweet, a note that vibrated in the air with childlike joy. The wings beat twice, catching the lamplight in a shimmer of etched color. The hatchling's golden eyes widened, and tears gathered again, but these were different tears. It let out a half sob, half laugh, and clutched its claws together. Birdie sings. Birdie sings again. The bird continued its melody, a series of trills that built into a lilting tune. Imperfect but alive. The hatchling scooped it into its arms, hugging it close as though afraid it might vanish. You fixed him. It squealed, tail lashing in delight. You fixed Birdie. Jax leaned back, wiping sweat from his brow, a grin tugging at his face despite the knot of nerves in his stomach. Told you. Just out of rhythm. The hatchling nuzzled the toy. then looked at Jax with a gaze too old and too earnest for its small frame. "You are kind." Jax froze. The word hit him harder than any threat ever had. Kindness was not a currency often traded on Krillus 9. He shrugged, trying to make light of it. "Nah, just good with busted things." The hatchling shook its head, as if refusing to let him hide behind the deflection. "Kind." The watcher in the shadow's bird's song echoed faintly through the ducks, notes spiraling up into the crawl space. Jax heard the melody rebound, as though the station itself carried it farther. He did not notice the shift in air above, the silent intake of breath that was not the hatchling's. For high in the dark, behind the grate of the maintenance crawl, a pair of eyes the color of molten suns lingered. They had watched Jax's patience, his hands steady where others would rush, his words gentle where others would fear. The Emperor of Dragons, though no title was spoken, had seen. But Jax Renner only saw a child smiling and a toy bird singing again. And in that fragile moment, it was enough. The station felt different the following cycle. It wasn't just Jax's nerves. Krillus 9 had a rhythm, dock alarms, vendor haggling, the low throb of our haulers disembarking. But now, beneath the usual chaos, there was something taut and unspoken, like a taut string ready to snap. Guards patrolled in pairs. Whole corridors had been scrubbed to a shine Jax hadn't seen in years. Even Pal Haldra, usually half asleep behind his console, barked at workers to stand straight. Stand clean, or stand gone. An Imperial visit wasn't rumor anymore. It was fact, and Jax had a sinking feeling it was fact because of the golden-eyed hatchling he had met in the Forgotten Bay. He thought about the little dragon constantly as he worked, the way its tears had turned to laughter when the toy bird sang, the way it had said kind. That word rattled around his chest like a loose bolt. But he also thought about the other thing, the weight he'd felt in the ducks above them. That presence, and it chilled him. Summon Ed was tightening a stabilizer bolt on a trader's shuttle when 3 shadows fell across him. They weren't dockhands. They weren't smugglers. These were armored guards, black scale plate polished until it looked wet. HELMS shaped like dragon skulls. Each one bore a plasma halberd humming faintly with restrained power. Mechanic Jax Renner, the tallest, said, voice flat as if reading from a decree, "You are summoned to the Imperial docking throne." Jax nearly dropped his wrench. "Summoned." His laugh came out too sharp. "You've got the wrong Renner. I don't get summoned. I get ignored. Occasionally stiffed, but not summoned." The guard's tail flicked once, a subtle gesture that said, "Stop talking. Walk." Another guard said. Jax considered. Bolting there were routes through the maintenance ducts only rats and men with too much desperation knew but one look at. Those halberds told him the guards would carve through steel before losing him. He set his wrench down and raised his hands. "All right, no sudden moves. Lead the way." The docking throne led him through the station's core, past areas he'd never been allowed to see. The air itself grew hotter, carrying the tang of ozone and volcanic stone. They entered a chamber vast enough to house 3 freighters nose-to-tail. The ceiling arched like the ribs of some ancient beast, lined with glowing heat vents that bathed everything in molten light. And at the center, on a dais of black obsidian veined with crimson, sat the docking throne. No human term really did it justice. It was part seat, part command console, part altar, and on it, coiled in majesty too vast for Jax's mind to comfortably grasp, sat a dragon, the Emperor. His scales shimmered like a storm of gold and fire. Horns swept back like spires of obsidian. Wings folded along his sides radiated power even at rest. His eyes, molten and unblinking, locked on Jax the moment he entered. Jax's legs nearly refused him, but the guards shoved him forward until he stood small, sweat-damp, and grease-stained in the glow of the throne. The Emperor leaned down. His voice rumbled, deeper than gravity itself. "You," Jax swallowed. "Me, you touched my bloodline." The words cracked through the air like lightning. Jax's brain scrambled for defense, but his mouth leapt ahead. "With all respect, sire, I didn't touch anyone. Not a scale. Not a." The Emperor's head lowered closer, until each breath of smoke-tinged heat washed over Jax's face. "Do not trifle." My hatchling's cries echoed through these halls. I heard them, I came, and I saw. The words thudded into Jax's chest like hammer blows. His throat worked dryly. "You saw. I watched as you repaired his toy," the Emperor said. "Watched as you soothed his sorrow. You did not recoil from him. You did not flee. You gave your craft, your patience, your kindness." The last word rolled off the Emperor's tongue like it was foreign, ancient. "And danger is all at once." Jax forced himself not to step back. "Look, I only fixed a machine. I didn't know he was yours. I didn't know." The Emperor's gaze silenced him. "And yet you did it." Judgmental long pause stretched. The chamber was so quiet Jax could hear the faint tick of Birdie's gears, still playing from somewhere deeper in the palace chambers. In that moment, Jax realized this wasn't just about a toy. He had been weighed, measured, observed. And now came judgment. The Emperor's voice was softer now, though still vast. "My kind does not often find value in humans. Fragile, temporary, driven by greed or fear. Yet you." His eyes narrowed. "You wield no fire, no claws, only hands. Yet you eased the heart of my heir where all else failed." Jax blinked, trying to absorb the words. Heir. He hadn't just fixed a random hatchling's toy. He'd calmed the only child of the Dragon Emperor. He suddenly felt very, very sick. He licked his lips. "I was just doing what I do. Fixing broken things. That's all." The Emperor's lips curled, exposing fangs longer than Jax's arms. "To you, perhaps. But to him, it was everything." The silence that followed pressed down heavier than the heat. Then, with the weight of stars behind it, the Emperor declared, "You will serve." Jax Renner stood frozen at the foot of the docking throne, every instinct urging him to argue, to run, to vanish. But the Emperor's command wasn't something you could slip away from. It pressed into the bones, into the air itself, as if the station now bore his will in its alloy. "Serve," Jax croaked. "Your Majesty, with all respect." "I'm just—" The words trailed off as the massive head descended again. Each scale gleamed like molten coin. The Emperor's eyes, twin suns, locked him in place. "You are keeper of the heir's heart." The Emperor rumbled. "Chosen not by decree, but by act. My hatchling trusted you when all others failed. That trust binds you now." The air Arivesa sound interrupted them. Light footsteps, a trill of gears, the small, piping voice of a child. "Papa." Birdie sings again. The hatchling burst into the chamber, wings flapping clumsily, claws clutching the toy bird that chirped and fluttered with every jostle. The guards stiffened but did not bar his way. He scampered across the polished obsidian floor until he collided with the Emperor's forefoot. Laughing with the boundless joy of the young, the Emperor, terror of fleets, ruler of flame, bent his colossal neck and nuzzled the hatchling with a tenderness that stopped Jax's heart. The child pressed Birdie up toward his father's face, as though offering the greatest treasure in the galaxy. "See, Papa." The human fixed him. Birdie sings again because of the human. The Emperor's gaze slid back to Jax, a weight of meaning behind it. "Because of you." Jax raised his palms weakly. "I swear, sire, I only did what anyone would have done." The hatchling turned, wide-eyed, and shook his head with childlike certainty. "No." Others yelled. "Others told me to be quiet. Only you fixed Birdie." The words cut sharper than any blade. Jax felt them settle in his chest, impossible to shrug off. Keeper of the Heart. Emperor's wings flexed, filling the chamber with a rush of heated air. His voice rolled like distant thunder. "In the annals of my line, few humans are remembered. Fewer still are honored. But from this day, Jax Renner, your name is bound to House of Flames." Jax's knees wobbled. "House of Wait, what? I'm a mechanic. I fix coolant leaks. I unstick cargo hatches. I'm not whatever you think I am." The Emperor's chuckle shook the walls. "You underestimate yourself. Kindness is rarer than fire, rarer than iron. My hatchling will learn from you what cannot be taught by dragons. Kindness." Jax echoed, bewildered. Fragile hands, gentle words, the wisdom to mend instead of destroy. The Emperor's gaze flared brighter. "That is your fire, and it will guard my heir's heart." Jax stared, unable to breathe. Keeper of the heir's heart. The title sounded like a curse and an honor all at once. An oath of scales and grease. The Emperor lowered one massive claw, each talon gleaming like a blade. The hatchling placed Birdie upon it, then scampered up to perch beside. Repeat. The Emperor commanded, and it shall be sealed. Jax's mouth went dry. Repeat what? The Emperor's eyes narrowed. I will mend what is broken. I will shield the heart of the air. I will honor the trust given. Jax's pulse thundered. Every survival instinct screamed at him to keep his head low. Agree, survive. But another part quieter, older remembered Kemi's broken ballerina. Remembered her smile when he fixed it. Remembered the hatchling's tears turning to laughter. He drew a slow breath. I will mend what is broken. I will shield the heart of the air. I will honor the trust given. The Emperor's head rose high, wings spreading wide until the chamber glowed with light refracted from every golden scale. So it is spoken. So it is bound. The hatchling clapped his claws, tail lashing with joy. Keeper Jax. Keeper Jax. Jax winced. Oh stars, that's going to stick, isn't it? A new path guards slammed their halberds down in unison. The chamber vibrated with the force of the proclamation. You are no longer nameless. The Emperor intoned. From this day, you walk under my protection. Fail, and no star will hide you. Succeed, and even dragons will honor you. The hatchling beamed, running up to Jax and thrusting Birdie toward him. Keeper Jax, come play. Birdie wants you too. Jax crouched awkwardly, taking the toy bird back into his calloused hands. Its trill rose again, filling the vast chamber with improbable sweetness. He looked at the hatchling's hopeful face, then at the Emperor's blazing eyes, and he realized the truth. He had fixed a toy and gained a family's trust, and now, without warning or choice, he had stepped into history.